Hi, welcome back. This video is going to talk about different ways of using the hypershader to create different textures for your different objects. In particular, the first thing we're going to create is going to be a sphere, a polygonal sphere. And this is going to be like an orb that you might see on your front lawn. So the idea of this is that it's going to have some sort of glow effect applied to it and some level of incandescence, incandescent light, and have a level of transparency. All right, so to get started, we're going to go to the Windows menu, go down to your rendering editors, and click on Hypershade. This Hypershade menu will open, and you can see what my default windows are. Now, if you don't see the browser, the Create, the Property Editor, or the Material Viewer, you can always go back and add these in from the very top section of the window menu within the Hypershade window. All right, now by default over here we've got some three basic surfaces that always come with every Maya file. I don't encourage you to use these, the first one being a Lambert 1. Leave them just the way they are. Every object that you create is going to be of that grayish color because of the Lambert 1, so we don't really want to change those. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to create ourselves a blend. And this blend is going to now be added to our library section over here in the browser. You can see it's called blend 1. We're going to call this an orb. Okay, and in the basic sense, let's give it a color. Now you'll notice that this little preview window right here won't change when I'm choosing colors and the outer circle. Okay, the outer circle basically gets us into the direction of where we want to be, but you have to click inside the center area or choose one of the prefab colors over here. All right, so I'm going to go with like this bluish color for my orb. And once you've chosen your color, you can simply move your mouse away and that color history window will disappear. All right, so let's take a moment here. Oops, I did not mean to do that. I'm going to come up here to my view menu and go down into the camera tools and detach the camera tools. I wanted you to see what this color actually looked like when I assigned it to my actual object, but you can't see it since it's back there. So utilizing the track tool, now you can see my object. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is select the object, and let me track one more time. Oops, that was the tumble. So that way you can see when I go to apply this, I'm moving this way up here because my menu is nice and long for the screen recording. I'm going to right click and hold and go all the way to the bottom where it says assign existing materials, and I'll release on top of the orb. All right, so now you can see that the orb color has been assigned to my poly sphere. It's a bluish color, and you can see there's a little bit of sheen taking place there. And that, again, is because we're dealing with a blend, not a Lambert. A Lambert would be very dull, and the blend is somewhat shiny. And the Phong, the Phong, which is located right here, is much, much shinier than the blend. All right, so if you don't see the colors showing for some reason, quite possibly you need to press the number 5 key on your keyboard. That will turn on colors. All right, moving forward, transparency of an object. So you can see that right now with it applied to it. If I were to click and drag on the transparency button or the scrubber, it'll move down and you'll see a little bit inside the center of it. In addition, you can kind of see inside of our polysphere here. Quite possibly the screen recorder isn't going to show it quite like it is showing up for me. But nonetheless, you now have a transparency set up for this object. Let's see, you can kind of see through it a little bit. You probably need to see something behind it. All right, we'll get back to that. In addition to doing a transparency on an object, let's take a brief moment to look at this in our renderer. So I'm going to close out of my Hypershade, and you can see what this object looks like when we render it. Now up here at the very top of the window is where we've got clapboards. Okay, these clapboards basically say render the current frame. So I'm going to click on the renderer, and now you'll see it over here in the upper right corner because that's where it was located in my perspective window. Okay. That's fine. If you want to see or do a comparison of sorts, feel free to click on this little box right here with the blue box around there. This will take a snapshot of your current frame, and now you'll see two of the exact same things listed right here because we basically took a snapshot of the very first one. Now I can close out of the renderer. Now, if I want to see what this looks like with different types of lighting assigned to it, okay, let's come up here to the Create menu and go down to Lights. Now, inside the Lights section, you can see that there's a variety of different lights, which we'll get into later on in the semester, not quite yet. But I do need to have some sort of light sometimes, depending on the surface. So I'm going to choose a directional light. Now the directional light you can barely see got added to the 0, 0 quadrant. So I'm going to take this opportunity to move it up and take a closer look at it. When you look at it nice and close, you'll see that there's arrows pointing in one particular direction. So basically that's letting you know that the light is coming from the directional light from the left and going to the right. You don't really have a great idea what this looks like, okay? However, what we can do is take a snapshot of it with the clapboard again, see what it looks like in the renderer, and now you'll see that this side over here is darkened and this side is very shiny and bright. Once again, I can take a snapshot of this, and now I will have a couple different copies of what I've just created. So this was the very first snapshot, and this is the second snapshot, okay? So the reason why we're getting this black outside over here is because, again, the light ends, or the directional light is only being shown on that one side. So now what we can do is actually change the angle of the directional light. And before I do that, it would be beneficial to turn on the number 7 key on your keyboard. The number 7 key is basically showing us what it looks like when the lights are turned on in the viewport, to kind of give you a better idea. So you can see that when I adjust or change the placement of this directional light, you're seeing how it's affecting on the blend itself. Okay. All right. Now, if I chose to move this over, maybe change the alignment of it, maybe make it a little bit bigger, add another ambient light. There's many different things that we can do with this directional light to change the effects of it, okay? Now again, over here in the channel box or in the attribute editor, there's many different things we can do with the light, including changing the color, the intensity, if you want more red or green or blue coming out of it, etc. Those are all different options within the lighting that we're not going to get into today. All right, that being said, let's take one more snapshot and we can see what it looks like. And once again, take another snapshot of it with the picture, the top of the render or window, and you'll see the differences here. So depending on how my camera or the angle of the light, that's how you're seeing the differences. All right, the next thing we're going to do is reopen up our Hypershader. So let's go into Windows and then go to Rendering Editors and choose Hypershade once again. First thing we need to do is select our orb if it's not already selected. All right, so now this will update the preview area. The next thing we're going to do is over here in the property editor, you'll notice that there's these two little icons of which they toggle between what's called the look dev view and the attribute editor. So if you click on this is going to take us over to what we know as the attribute editor. You'll see that the different options within this window right here are similar to the exact same things you would see in the attribute editor on the far right side as a toggle between the channel box and the attribute editor. All right, so nonetheless, we are inside the attribute editor section right here. We're going to move ourselves down and you'll see all these different choices that I encourage you to play around with, see what the different effects of them are. But nonetheless, we're going to go into what's called the special effects section and we're going to increase the glow intensity. Give this little scrub right here. Now the glow intensity, you're not going to see it happening right here in the preview. This is one of those cases where you absolutely have to have your window rendered in order to see the differences. So once again, we'll click on this clapboard here, and there's the glow intensity. All right, so a couple things about lighting is that it's great to have, let me snapshot this actually. It's great to have lighting in your scene, but if you add one light, be aware you may need to add multiple lights because by the time you add in one light, you've taken away Maya's default lighting. So for example, I'm going to select that directional light we just added and I'll delete it. Okay, so I've turned it off. Now you'll see my object turn black, not because it's black, but if you recall, we pressed the number 7 key to see what the lighting view of it was. And when you turn on the 7 of the viewing of the lighting in the viewport area, you've removed the ability for it to recognize if you have any default lighting that Maya puts in place. So by pressing the number 5 or the number 6 key will bring back your colors or your textures to your object. And obviously now you can see that there's the blue colors all around. It's not just picking up where the direction of the lights were. All right, moving forward, if I go back to that clapboard now and I take another snapshot of it, this is probably a better idea of what the actual view is for this object without lighting in the actual scene, because now you're seeing that orb-like effect that we were going for all the way around the object. All right, so feel free again to snapshot that if you would like. And then you, again, will see a historical reference of the different things that you've added to your scene. All right, very cool. Bringing back the hyper shader. Here is our orb. There are, again, multiple different things that you can modify within this attribute editor of a particular surface. So feel free to play around with these different features inside of there. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is create ourselves a ocean. So we're going to come over here to the Create menu, and let's click on Ocean Shader. I shouldn't say ocean, I meant an ocean shader. Okay, so we're going to just click on Ocean Shader, and there it is. And let's leave it for what it is right now and see what it looks like. And then if you want to give it a glow, like there's fog on top of it, or if we want to change the movement speed of it, we can do that as well. So now that we've done that, I'm going to close out of the hyper shader and add to the stage a polyplane, move it up a little bit, and I'm also going to increase the subdivision's height and width for this object. All right, and then move this up just a little bit so you can see when I go to add this. I'm going to right click on top of it and go down to Assign Existing Material and choose Ocean Shader. Now, the shader is different than a surface in that you can apply shaders to surfaces that already have a surface. So for example, Lambert is already assigned to the polyplane 1. So therefore, when I created the ocean shader, I'm assigning the shader on top of the polyplane that already has a surface there, that being a Lambert. I could have changed the surface on my polyplane to a Blinn or a Fong, and that's fine, and then you can still assign a shader on top of it. All right, so let me click off so you can see what this looks like. You can kind of see it looks kind of like an ocean of sorts, right? So the key to using the ocean shader, or really any shader, is that you need to have lighting in order for it to work. So let's go back to the Create menu. We'll go down to Lights, and in this case, let's do an area light. So there's my area light. You can see it's been added. And here it is, and you'll see that the little poke, or that normal that's popping out, is going to be where the light is coming from. So we want to point that downward. Okay, I'm going to move my sphere out of the way a little bit here. Let's make this a little bit bigger, more grandiose. Looks like a satellite, right? So kind of put it up there in the sky, so to speak. All right, and then we can check out what this looks like in our renderer. Okay, so here's the renderer. And there it is. So you're starting to see that there's a reflection taking place over here. You can see that the movement that is being displayed with the shader has the illusion of looking like an ocean. In addition, in the viewport, now obviously you're not seeing the full effect of it. If you press the number 7 key, you'll see that this is where the water is getting that reflection that we're talking about there, or some sort of splash effect. And you can also press the play button in your viewport and see the movement that's being created within the ocean. All right. All right, so there's many different things you can do for this ocean in terms of changing the attributes for it, the movement, the agitation of it, etc. So feel free to play around with some of those different settings.